Dr. Chrysovalantis Kyriacou is a lecturer in ecclesiastical history at the Theological School of the Church of Cyprus. A Byzantinist by training, Dr. Kyriacou has taught at the University of Cyprus, European University of Cyprus, and Royal Holloway University of London. Dr. Kyriacou has authored a number of books, including Orthodox Cyprus under the Latins, Society, Spirituality, and Identities, and the topic of today's episode, the Byzantine warrior hero, Cypriot folk songs as history and myth, 965 to 1571. Chrysovalanti, it's great to have you back. Welcome again.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for the kind invitation.
So let's begin by describing the world of the Eastern Mediterranean in this time period. And we're talking about the Middle Byzantine period and its conflicts. Can you just give a little description of the political landscape at the time?
So Cyprus is part of Byzantium, which is the East Roman Empire, and it's part of Byzantium since the early 4th century Christian era. For much of late antiquity, the island is demilitarized. There is no army based in Cyprus. But in the 7th century, Cyprus experiences the Arab attacks. So we have the birth of Islam and the Muslim Arab expansion throughout the Mediterranean. And Cyprus continues to experience Arab attacks as late as 965, when it is recovered by Emperor Nikephoros Phokas, who is one of the warrior emperors of Byzantium. He's the leader of the Byzantine counteroffensive against the Muslim world. So this middle second phase of Byzantine rule in Cyprus marks a period of Byzantine militarization. And this happens because Cyprus is basically surrounded by Muslim states at war with Byzantium. During the late 11th and 12th century, we have the Crusades and the founding of Crusader policies in the Middle East. And the Byzantines are the closest allies to the Crusaders, and Cyprus is the closest military base to the Holy Land. But at the same time, the Crusaders are unreliable allies for the Byzantines, and so Cyprus needs to be guarded. So in this context, the Byzantines fortify Cyprus. They build all these castles, the Kyrenia Mountains, the Pentadaktylos region, and they also establish special units on the island, including the Athanati, the Immortals, and the Varangians, basically Vikings. The island is ruled by military commanders, and the Byzantine fleet uses Cypriot ports. In 1191, Cyprus is conquered eventually by the Crusaders, who become more and more hostile in their diplomatic relations with Byzantium. And the Kingdom of Jerusalem and Cyprus is founded on the island. The old Byzantine military elite is replaced by a Frankish military elite under the Lusignan king. The Lusignans, from the 13th century to the late 15th century, they continue being at war with their Muslim neighbors, the Turks, the Mamluks, in Asia Minor, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. So basically, the Christian versus Muslim conflict continues. Venice makes Cyprus a colony in 1489, but its rule ends in 1570 when the Ottomans invade Cyprus and conquer the island. So this is very, very briefly the history of 6 centuries from the Middle Byzantine period to the end of Venetian rule in Cyprus.
I was genuinely surprised to read that Cyprus had the Varangian.
Yes.
Yeah, there. And for those who might not be familiar with the Varangians, I believe they were a unit of Vikings, I guess to use that term, who served the Byzantine emperor, right? I believe they were his personal guard at one point. Its relation to Cyprus is something that just came out of left field for me.
We don't know much about their activities in Cyprus, the Varangians were an elite mercenary unit which was fighting for the Byzantine emperor. The emperors liked to use mercenaries because mercenaries who were foreigners were more loyal to them than to anyone else. So they formed his personal guard, and they were really good at battle. They were basically Anglo-Saxon, Danish, and Rus, so Proto-Russians, who came to Constantinople, and they were used mainly against the Turks and the Arabs. And there are references in sources that a unit of Varangians was guarding the port of Paphos. This was also a surprise for me because the Varangians were one of the best units in the Byzantine army in the Middle Byzantine period, and we also had them in Cyprus, and they were also fighting in Sicily and Asia Minor.
Incredible. Now, it's in this period, I believe between the 9th and the 11th centuries, that we first hear of the ακριτικά τραγούδια. So who were the Akritas, and how would we best translate that term for the modern ear?
The Akrites, Akrite in Byzantine Greek, they were basically Byzantine lords governing areas of Asia Minor that were close to the Acra, namely the frontier, the border with the Abbasid Caliphate and the various Turkish emirates. So these guardians of the border can translate it this way. They were warrior aristocrats with their own army recruited of peasant soldiers. So the peasantry, they were obliged to go to war with them. They resembled to Western knights, but at the same time, in Byzantium there is always this strong central authority of the emperor. You may be powerful lord, but you always have to fight for the state, because the state, the emperor, is your source of legitimation. The Phocas family belonged to the Akrite, the Komnini, and the Duke also, and these three families eventually succeeded in ruling the empire from Constantinople as they had their own dynasties. And also the later dynasties of Byzantium, for example, the Paleologi, the last dynasty, they were related to the Komnini. So families of the Akrite had a very prominent role in Byzantine history, not only in the Middle Byzantine period, but also in the long term.
Their memory survives in the ακριτικά τραγούδια, if I understand that right. So what were they, and how many do we know have survived in the sources?
So we know that wandering singers traveled from castle to castle throughout Asia Minor, praising the deeds of these warrior heroes, and reasonably seeking their patronage. The ακριτικά τραγούδια, Acritic Songs, songs from the Akrite, begin with these wandering singers. But there were also military singers who sang heroic songs before battle. And these songs were not written down in the Middle Ages, but they survived orally as folk songs in peasant communities. So peasant communities took them, changed the language and the plot as centuries passed, inserted new details, but kept themes and motifs that went back to Byzantine times. In that way, these songs by anonymous composers passed down from generation to generation until they were recorded by ethnographers between the 850s and 1950s, and I'm speaking mainly for Cyprus. And we have various volumes of Acritic songs from all over the Greek world. The oldest collections are their materials are considered to be of better quality because they are closer to the original songs. In later collections, ethnographers tended to modernize or nationalize the aesthetics and the contents of the songs by changing verses and their meaning. I don't have a clear picture about the exact number of Cypriot heroic folk songs, but I will say that concerning Cyprus, around 100 songs survived, perhaps more, and these were probably composed initially at Asia Minor and gradually reached Cyprus from the late 11th century onwards. And this happened through traveling soldiers and singers, as well as refugees, as the Turkish tribes conquered areas of Asia Minor, Christian communities fled. So when the songs came to Cyprus, they were reworked and expanded by local singers.
So understandably, they're difficult to date. I mean, ethnographers only started to study them in the past since the 50s, you said. So what clues help us understand or trace their origins? Like what clues in the songs help us say, okay, yeah, this is from this time in Cypriot history?
This is a very very important question, and I'll try to answer it briefly because of the methodological issues involved. So when I wrote I wrote a book about the Byzantine warrior hero, and I tried to see whether what I understood to be Byzantine was indeed Byzantine. So I tried to find tiny clues in the songs that show that while the language has changed and was modernized from generation to generation, from century to century, you know the Cypriot dialect, the Franks, the Venetians, the Turks, the British have left linguistic loans, and even the pronunciation has changed from Byzantine Greek. So while the language changes, the initial core remains Byzantine. But in what sense? Proper names, for example. The names of the heroes are Byzantine. We have Phokas, we have Doukas, we have Constantas, we have Porphyris, we have Digenis. These are all names of either real people or legendary heroes. Place names, the legal and social status of heroes, the description of clothes, weapons, the description of power relations, all go back to the Byzantine period. But the language is different.
I know you said that there's quite a few songs that have survived. What are the names of some of these songs, and is there a repository where we could see listen to the songs in their forms as they were recorded in the 50s and 60s?
We can read them in the collections of ethnographers, but there is a recording by Michalis Christodoulidis who put music on the songs, and the songs were sang again and recorded in audio form in the 1980s. You can find it in YouTube. The title in Greek is "Kato stes akres ton akron," which is one of the verses of Acritic Songs. Basically sets the scene for the beginning of the song, which is quite often all the drama happens in a frontier zone near the river Euphrates in Mesopotamia, for example. So we have the songs bear the name of the main hero. We have the songs, different variations of the same song, or different songs under the name of the same hero, of the Digenis, Mavroudis, Asgouris, Arestis, Porphyris, Kostandas, Armouris, Theophylactos, who is Theophylact, and others.
So where were they typically performed, these songs? I mean, do we know the social context of how they were performed?
We have no idea. We know, as I said before, that there were wandering singers and also military singers in the Byzantine army. We assume that these songs were performed in panegyria, religious feasts. After mass, there was a feast and people were singing the songs. And in 1570, Stephen of Lusignan, he was a Frankish Cypriot Dominican and a historian of medieval Cyprus, who says, he wrote that the Greeks in Cyprus sang their own songs after dinner. And ethnographers have suggested that some of these songs might have been also sang in weddings. We know that in modern times, the songs were still performed in panegyria as recent as the 1970s and the 1980s. What I found really interesting was that Magda Kitromilidou, she was a prominent Cypriot scholar. Her parents came from Asia Minor. And she did field work in Paphos, which is one of the most remote, it was one of the most remote areas in regions in Cyprus. And she collected some of these songs, I think it was in the 1930s or 1940s. Some of these songs were sung by people in jail, prisoners. I remember reading that one of her sources was a Turkish Cypriot. So a Turkish Cypriot who sang songs in Greek about the Acritic.
That is really interesting. So there's obviously an appeal to the the voiceless, right? It would have resonated with the lower classes, it sounds like. Is that a fair assumption? Is this something that really...
Yes, this is one of the main points made in the book. So, these songs were initially composed in outside Cyprus, in Asia Minor, and later they came to Cyprus. But in both Cyprus and Asia Minor, peasant communities lived in similar conditions. They faced the oppression of the powerful, namely aristocratic landowners, Byzantines or Latins, later Ottoman. And the very fact that these songs survived orally in a specific region for a very long period shows that people in this region could identify with the heroes. It also shows that the songs expressed the values and perceptions of the communities, preserving them. And in that way, the songs became the voice of voiceless peasants who did not leave contemporary written records.
How would we describe the typical protagonists in these songs? I mean, my understanding is they're often from marginalized elements of society themselves. What's the standard sort of story and typical themes that emerge in a lot of these acritic songs?
Let's focus on the protagonist for a moment. The songs could be categorized in two groups. So in one group, the main warrior hero serves state authority, the king. He's a protector of the community from evil power, monsters, and enemies. Usually, these enemies are Muslims. And he's typically a young, noble aristocrat who fights in horse. He's a good Christian, caring for his family, and loyal to the king. But in the other group, the hero is in conflict with state authority. He's in conflict with the nobility. He's in conflict with the king. In the songs of Digenis fighting Pharos, he's even in conflict with God and cosmic order. And he may be a noble facing unjust treatment, or quite often a social borderer, namely a marginal figure, a swineherd, half Jew, an outcast. And in this group of songs, the hero fights against the established social order to restore justice. He ridicules and defeats the nobles, and he's no more the protector of the community, but he's essentially a social rebel.
Mm-hmm. And what traits, what are celebrated in these songs for the protagonist? I mean, I think of like honor, for example. That really seems to be a common theme that comes through some of these songs.
Yes, we have a series of social values celebrated in the songs, and these social values are those of a medieval militarized society in the Mediterranean, and are common to both the Greek East, Byzantium, and the Latin West, and I can explain why. So the main social value celebrated is honor, timi. The hero is loyal to the king, a protector of the community, for which reason he receives wealth, offices in exchange for his service. In late Byzantium, especially after the rule of the Komneni, who came from a family of Acrite, imperial administration was centered around the oikos, the household, family. And a family of aristocrats ruled the state, ruled Byzantium, collaborating with other noble families with whom they were united through marriage alliances. So family was very important in the concept of honor. Honor framed gender roles and defined what was socially acceptable. And honor helped the preservation of taxes, of order, political and social. Honor in the family was expressed as solidarity, respect to the leader of the clan, protection of women, prudence, and wisdom. And all these are also social values of the traditional Cypriot and Mediterranean families in general. This honor code emerges from the classical Roman social values, the mos maiorum. Mos maiorum basically means the way of the elders. So in both Byzantium and the Latin West, especially after the 12th century, there is a revival in the interest of these societies to ancient Romans. And they read Roman texts, they read Roman authors, they read Greek authors, ancient Greek authors writing about the Roman world. And Byzantium was basically the Roman Empire in its medieval phase, with Constantinople as its capital, and language. The language is not Latin but Greek. So the Roman code of honor, piety, valor, self-discipline, respect of the elders, respect of the state, is perpetuated in medieval times, and these values are reflected in the songs as well.
Yeah, and I find it interesting also that there's a lot of parallels with Homeric myths as well. And I think I believe that you actually point out that there's a synthesis of pre-Christian and Christian elements. To your point, can you use, for example, the most famous Akriti, the Digenis Akritas, as an example of that? You mentioned earlier the Charopalema, which is the basically the battle with death personified. Can you use that as an example, and maybe in the same breath tell us a little bit more about Digenis Akritas, because he's arguably the most famous heroic folk hero. Can you speak to that?
Yes. Digenis means the two-blood lord. He's half Roman and half Arab. His father is a Christianized Arab, emir. We know that in Byzantine times there were Arab converts to Orthodox Christianity, changing sides and fighting for the Byzantines. And there were also Turks fighting for the Byzantines and having embraced Christianity. So Digenis is the offspring of a mixed marriage. His mother is a member of the Ducas family of Acrite, and his father is an Arab lord. And his story is related in a 12th century epic, the Epic of Digenis, which was composed in the court of the Komneni. And the Epic of Digenis is a masterpiece of Byzantine literature. But stories on Digenis, the two-blood lord, were much older than the epic and circulated orally in folk songs. And sometimes other heroes took traits of Digenis, or Digenis took traits of other heroes. But let's focus on Cypriot folk songs. In songs from Cyprus, Digenis is sometimes a lord and sometimes a peasant. So he's sometimes an outcast, the son of a Jewish woman. He collaborates with Roma people, so he's not really always this bright aristocratic warrior hero. In the songs where Digenis appears as a lord, he is the typical protector of the community. He fights against dragons, he fights against giant crab, much like Hercules. Hercules fights, in one of the myths, he fights against a giant crab. In the song of Gauras, you have Gauras, the crab, as a personification of evil. And you have this hero caring for them and willingly fighting the monster. It's like today is like Batman fighting, Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the song of? There is a song which is a folk song actually, and is included in the category of heroic folk songs. The song of Diorkou, Aios Georgios. In this song, we have basically the same story, and this song is still sung in Cyprus. It's very popular because of Alkinos, Ioannidis. The logic is the same. You have St. George, who is the model warrior hero of Group A. So he obeys the king. The king asks his help to fight against the dragon, and he defeats the dragon and he kills the dragon, and the king offers the hand of his daughter, but the saint declines. He says that St. George, and the only thing I want from you is build me a church so that the name of God is praised. So although this is kind of religious song, it also belongs to Group A of the heroic folk songs, because of the theme, you have a monster threatening the community, and you have this model a warrior hero coming to defend the community. And in this way, symbolically, the song operates symbolically in two ways. You have royal authority or imperial authority showing to the subjects that I care for you and I am your defender. And at the same time, peasants think or imagine or expect that God or the state, the emperor, the king, the nobility, someone will come to help them against all their problems. The
Yeah.
study will fix this. But Digenis, he also wishes to live forever. So he becomes a rebel against cosmic order, and he fights against Haros, the Lord of Death. He is eventually, this is the Haropalema, the fight against the Haros, the fight against death, to achieve immortality. And he's eventually defeated with God's help because he's a rebel against cosmic order. He's very similar, as I said before, to Hercules, because Hercules too fights a dragon, a giant crab, and he also fights death. I think that Digenis is very popular among the Cypriots because he's both a protector of the weak, a protector of the community, and a fighter against death, which is the greatest form of injustice. And this concept of justice and injustice comes and goes in acritic folk songs, especially in the second group.
Where can we see some of the local traditions around the island with regards to Digenis? Because we talked about the memory in song, but there's also memory in the landscape as well, I believe.
Primarily in Pentadaktylos, the Keringia Mountains. Pentadaktylos means the five-finger mountain, thought to have been created by the imprint of Digenis' hand while chasing a Saracen pirate. And this is, of course, a story not related in any of the folk songs. And it seems to me, at least, but that toponyms related to, explicitly related to Digenis Akritas are usually modern tourist inventions. Although we do have in the local folk tradition many toponyms referring to dragons, Drakondorodsos, Drakondospia, so the rock of the dragon, the cave of the dragon. Traditional societies experience the world very differently than we do. For them, although they were Christians, there was a superficial level of Christianization, and there was also belief in magic and pre-Christian beliefs that we see in the form of demonic powers, Kalikanzari, and dragons.
Mm-hmm. I remember growing up hearing stories about Digenis Akritas, and it's been really interesting because I don't know, and I don't think they would know, and I don't know if any ethnographers have ever explored how far back these stories go, but Petra du Romiou, which is...
Exactly. Petra du Romiou is an example of a very late appearance as a tourist attraction. I think it was probably under the British, or perhaps in the 1960s when Cyprus became independent. But there are no references in the songs about Petra du Romiou. We do have, however, many toponyms concerning the Rigena, which is a fascinating chapter. The Rigena, the queen, which is another, I think, this concept of a queen who she's also a sorceress, and she also fights like a man. It goes back to the cult of Aphrodite. Toponyms concerning Rigena are very common in areas of rural areas of Paphos, Akamas, for example, as well as in the Pentadaktylos region.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was just in Cyprus last summer, and driving through Pyrgos, which is near my dad's village in Moni. There are some ruins in the city center, and my dad would point out this one particular spot and say that's the tower of the queen of the Rigena. And I think even the street name is called Rigena. I actually reached out to a contact that I had, and I asked them about what they knew about this site, and it actually turned out to be the remains of a Cistercian. Like, I don't know if it was a monastery.
Yes,
But
Abbey. There is an Abbey in Pyrgos.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's right. So it has nothing to do with that, but I can understand what you mean. How some of these elements kind of seep into the modern imagination. Who knows when?
It's very hard to know because, you know, the songs have. It's much more difficult to modify songs than stories. Stories can be easily expanded, the plot can be changed, but songs, because they are sung and we don't know how these songs were performed, we have no idea. There is no musical notation.
Right.
And but after the 15th century, there is rhyming in rhyming appears in Greek folk songs. So we have to. There is an exact number of syllables used. So it is much more difficult to change the structure of the song and the plot of the song than stories. Stories can change with basically no effort, but it's more difficult to change the songs. So with the songs, we have kind of an oral source, that an oral depository of memory and perceptions that can be dated with greater precision, because when the songs are recorded, they are fixed, but stories can change more easily.
You know, you said that unfortunately, there's no musical notation that survived. But in the 50s and the 60s, when they first started studying them, were they, maybe you can help me understand this, were they not sung? And did someone not record them in the way that they were still performed in the 50s and the 60s?
Well, the first transcriptions of the songs were made in the mid 19th century. There was a huge effort by ethnographers, both Greek ethnographers coming from mainland Greece, but also French and German Hellenists interested in modern Greek culture and digging to find information on the modern communities, the modern Greek communities. So these people were interested in collecting and preserving the songs, the text of the songs, and sometimes modify the lyrics so as to prove the continuation of the undisturbed national continuation of the Greeks from time immemorial to their own time. So they paid particular attention to elements that seem to be pre-Christian or echoed Greek mythology. No, there was no effort, perhaps because some of these ethnographers did not have the musical training to preserve the way they were sung, or because people sang them in different ways. Even in Cyprus, there are different variations of singing from area to area. I think this is why they did not record the way they were sung.
And in the 12th and 13th centuries, you also talk about a merging of Frankish and Byzantine warrior ethos. What is that exactly?
Well, as in the case of Byzantine warrior heroes, the Frankish and basically the Frankish crusader warrior ethos, the chivalric warrior ethos, was rooted in the Roman honor code. So plus Christianity, so a kind of Christian militarism. The Frankish knight is self-disciplined, has valor, but he's loyal to the king, and he's a good Christian, and he fights the enemies of faith. But the difference, you may wonder, what difference did it make for Cypriot peasants? The difference was cultural and religious. The Franks spoke, especially in the 13th century, mainly Western European languages and French, Catalan, Venetian, so forth, and used Latin as an official language, especially in ecclesiastical documents. And they were Latin Rite Christians. And this created a kind of imbalance between the social elite and the peasantry. There was always a social gap between elite and non-elite groups, but after the late 12th, 13th century, things became much worse for the peasants because the elite were considered to belong to a church that was that had heretical or schismatic beliefs. We are in the Middle Ages, so spiritual salvation is very important for these people.
And that conflict is reflected in the songs as well, because if I remember right, they now typically paint Franks as being volatile, aggressive, ignorant, that sort of thing.
Yes, one of the things that make these songs Byzantine is perception of the other, the way others are perceived, and there is this use of stereotypes towards the Muslims, but also towards the Franks. The Franks are both admired as excellent warriors and praised for the beauty of their women. And I found this very interesting. There are warrior banners, banners used in war. And at the same time, they were despised for their cruelty. And what I found really interesting, I didn't know it, but I realized it when I read many of these songs. There are very few explicit references to the Franks. And this shows the social, religious, and cultural gap between the peasantry and their lords, because the peasants, they identify themselves with heroes that, although they do resemble in their social values to the Frankish elite, they have Byzantine names, they seem to be Orthodox, and they behave like Byzantine warrior heroes, Byzantine nobles.
So just to make sure that I understand this correctly, these acritic songs, they exist virtually all over the Greek-speaking world, right? You can find
Yes.
acritic songs in Asia Minor. You can find acritic songs in the Peloponnese. You can find them, of course, in Cyprus.
In Crete.
In Crete. Now, what makes the acritic songs unique in Cyprus is the evidence of the Cypriot dialect that exists in the preservation of these songs. That I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Is there another way that we can identify how they become Cypriot besides language? Is there any other clues or traits that emerge in some of these songs?
There are two pillars to answer this question. So there are specific themes that appear primarily in Cypriot heroic folk songs. And in this way, we can identify these songs, apart from the language, as originating from Cyprus. One is the Haropalema, the fight of the Digenis against Haros. This is presented much more emphatically in Cypriot heroic folk songs than in folk songs of other areas. The other theme is bride snatching. So the hero proves his worth by taking another man's bride sometimes explicitly raping her. This is also very Cypriot. Apart from these two very, very specific themes, the songs are Cypriot because they were sung and preserved in Cyprus for a very long period of time. And by doing so, the people preserving, adapting the songs, they identified with the heroes, and they identified with the heroes because the songs they had something to learn from the songs that was useful in the specific historical conditions experiencing on the island.
Well, is the I have written here, the Song of Antzoules, and as a sub point here, is that a reflection of what you're explaining here?
In the Songs of Antzoules, we have a very rare reference to a specific historical event. So in 1363, as we know from Leontios Macheras, Cypriot chronicler of the 15th century, there was a Frankish Cypriot, a Lusignan raid on the castle of Anemourion in southern Asia Minor, which was controlled by the Turks. So the Lusignan fleet attacked, people were killed, the castle was, and the fleet left Anemourion with captives. And this event is also mentioned in the Cypriot song of Antzoules. But here the bad guys, surprisingly, are the Franks who raid a Byzantine castle and take as captive Antzoules, leading his son Orestes to come to his rescue. So one would expect that the Cypriot peasantry would identify with the Franks because the Franks are also Christians fighting against the Muslims. But in this case, there is the song changes the historical event, and the hero Antzoules and Orestes, they are on the receiving end of violence by Latin Christian warriors. So the question is, why does this happen? Why do they change the historical event? Why do they choose to identify with the victims of a raid? They do so because the peasants, Cypriot peasants, we don't know when exactly. We don't have specific historical information about when this song was first composed in Cyprus. Cypriot peasant communities had to face, they had a really hard time. They experienced heavy taxation, natural disasters leading to famine, including high rates of child mortality, epidemics, pirate raids, and war. For these people, time passed slowly, death came quickly. They were forced by their masters to do unpaid work. In the period of Latin rule, mobility without permission was strictly prohibited. In Frankish and Venetian times, large numbers of peasants and slaves were forced to work in sugar plantations and in the salt lakes as part of, especially in the Venetian period, of a proto-capitalist economy directed towards profit. So life could be quite hard for them. So if they had no other way of responding to all this pressure, if they had no other way of reacting, the only way for the peasants to show their agency, in a way, was through fighting symbolically their masters in the songs, through fighting injustice. Digenis Akritas becomes their own hero because he even fights death, which is in the Greek folk tradition, death is the highest, the worst expression of injustice.
Okay. Chrysovalantis, this was this was great because I feel like I understand a lot more of how these traditions originated, and the significance of the tradition in the Cypriot consciousness. So I really appreciate your time coming back on here again and sharing again something that most people won't get a chance to learn about, only because it's kind of hard to get a hold of. So Chrysovalantis, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. It was a pleasure for me too. Thank you. Take care.
You too, Chrysovalantis. Talk soon.